Order. Please, do sit down. Thank you, Hilary. Good morning, and thank you for coming to the first evidence session on our inquiry into the way in which current and former serving personnel are supported in the judicial process by the Ministry of Defence. It is a highly emotive subject and one which has deeply affected many people. We do not wish to add to that emotion or to cause any further distress. I would therefore like to make it clear that while the experience of individuals is helpful to us in better understanding the process, we are not a court of appeal and therefore cannot take up individual cases. Thank you very much for coming along today. Could I ask you please to introduce yourself, starting with Hilary and your sort of background in this, if that's all right.
I'm Hilary Meredith. I'm the CEO of my own practice, Hilary Meredith Solicitors. I'm a civil lawyer, and I've been representing members of the armed forces for around 27 years, or their families.
Thank you very much.
I'm Nicholas Mercer. I'm a priest in Salisbury Diocese and served with the Army as a military lawyer for 20 years.
And we are not related?
We're not related.
Unfortunately.
I'm Lewis Cherry. I'm Director of Lewis Cherry Limited Solicitors. I'm a solicitor in private practice, and I act and have acted for about the last 20 years in the defence of service men, women and their families in a variety of legal processes, which I've set out to you in a letter, show the range of the type of things I've done.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So could I ask you individually, what is your involvement been in representing clients who have been investigated by the Iraq Historical Allegations Team? What has your specific role been in that? And can I start with you, Hilary?
Yes, as a civil lawyer, I'm not involved in the criminal proceedings or prosecutions, but I see the aftermath. And in particular, I was contacted by 3 soldiers who had gone through the Al-Swedi inquiry. That inquiry was subsequently dropped, and there was no case. And they had had their lives on hold for 5 years. And they really wanted to know if anything could be done as a result of that. They didn't have legal representation, I understand it, at the inquiry. My own view is, had they been given legal representation of some sort, then maybe that inquiry would have concluded much earlier than 5 years. In effect, there was nothing we could do for them in reality after the event. I've also been contacted by other soldiers in particular, and those acting for them, who have said that currently there's judicial proceedings going on, particularly relating to Iraq, where there is no framework of support in place for members of the armed forces, and particularly ex-members of the armed forces, who are subsequently facing proceedings. What I'm doing really is signposting them mainly to Mr. Cherry at the end, who is the criminal lawyer, and offering some advice and support. Okay.
Just so we get an idea, could you outline to us when these ex-servicemen or women or serving servicemen and women come to you and their lives have been put on hold, this 5-year investigation, could you just give us an example or give the committee an example of what impact that has had on the individual's life?
Those that I've spoken to, literally their lives are on hold. They feel the expression that was used is hung out to dry by the military for the lack of support. Many of them have suffered from mental stress as a result, and if they had already had some mental stress or possibly PTSD as a result of service, that's been highlighted as a result of ongoing proceedings. One person in particular refuses to leave his house, has lost all faith in anybody outside the walls of his home, just from a lack of support. So
and has that individual been charged with anything?
I'm not sure whether he has,
okay.
And this is through a third party because he won't even speak to me.
Right.
It's very difficult to get him to speak to, but it's not just legal support, it's welfare and health, mental support as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And can I put the same question to you, please, Reverend Mercer?
Yes, I mean, I've obviously not in practice anymore,
yeah.
But I was a witness in the Baha Musa court martial. I was a core participant in the Baha Musa inquiry, and I've given a statement to the IHAT, in fact, a few months ago, having made further complaints after I left the army in 2011. So I too am one of these people caught up in it. And I remember when I came back from Iraq, I said to my father that I don't think this will be finished until about 2012. And here we are in 2016, and I think 2022 would be not an unreasonable estimate as to how long this looks like going on for. I also get approached because of what I've said and done by people who said I've got matters that I'm concerned about, so I have acted as a conduit. Obviously I'm still on the roll of solicitors, so I have a professional duty, and then report those allegations on behalf of an individual if the need arises. So I'm caught up in a sort of different way, but I have first-hand experience of being a witness and a member of the armed forces caught up in judicial proceedings.
Thank you. And Mr. Cherry, same to you.
Mine is slightly more detailed and involved. I have a number of clients who are currently being investigated by IHAT. Those that are in the public domain, you'll be aware that public interest lawyers took a case some years ago to the High Court called Al Sweeney and others, and there were 5 cases, 2 of which involved my clients, one of which is Baha Musa, of which I had one co-participant, one defendant at the court-martial, the war crimes trial, and I had 8 co-participants in the public inquiry, and of course they're all still pending. Rev West was one of the co-participants, but he's not pending from that side of it, but others are, and there are a number of other individuals that I act for who were not alleged to be involved in the initial part, but were being looked at for other things, as I understand it. Okay. There were other investigations at the time being run against the Queen's Lancashire Regiment, which are still possibly subject to IHAT. I have had one case, again listed in that, there was the Baha Musa, and the 5th, one of the 5 cases was the case of Wali Musban, and Lance Corporal S, as he was identified, was my client from the shooting in tail end of 2003 in Telic 2, an on-duty shooting on the streets under circumstances. I acted for him both at the police station. He was reported for prosecution for murder. We had a formal preliminary inquiry, and after that it was all dropped. And so he presumed it was all over until IHAT came along, and then it was reopened. He's still serving and is now much further up the ranks. I don't want to say more because it would identify him.
Yeah.
IHAT then reinvestigated. We had a series of interviews with IHAT. It was reported for prosecution. It went to the Service Prosecution Authority. He maintained the case that he maintained right at the outset. And he was told last year that it had been dropped. So from 2000...
For a second time.
For the second time. So from 2003 to 2015, some 12 years, he's had that hanging over his head and has been running twice. And as you can imagine, when it reopened again, he's known within, obviously, his regiment and the unit, and it's made his life very difficult, and it makes his ongoing career difficult.
Yeah. Can I ask you, as you're speaking, just to all slightly lean forward, just because the microphone will be easier to pick up what you're saying. How do your clients come and find you? How do they hear of you? How do they go from getting a knock on the door from IHAT or a notification if it happens from the MOD? How do they then come and find you in particular? I'll start with you.
I think really it's just from reputation that I'm known for representing the armed forces, but there's no direct link or no signposted to me. The group that contacted me were the Veterans with One Voice, who they represent quite a number of military personnel, very scared to come forward, very scared to even speak to me, asking me if there's anything that we could do, just to put in place some sort of framework of support. And it's really through them that I've become very concerned about it.
Okay, and what about you, Mr. Cherry and Reverend Mercer? How have people come across you? Presumably from your work before.
Yes, from the Baha Musa inquiry, people have contacted me and said, I don't dare make this allegation. And will you do it for me? Certainly in one case. And the other thing is that, I mean, I'm obviously seeing this from a different angle, but talking to ex-military colleagues, things will come out in conversation, which we all seem to have in common. I mean, I did a Sunday worship, by way of example, last week, I was talking to a military chaplain who said, I came across some soldiers beating up Iraqis. That's just, what do I do with that? There's a duty to report it. I haven't done so yet. But just casual conversation with former military colleagues, there's so many of these things washing around.
Okay. And Mr. Cherry, for yourself?
Word of mouth. People know me. Obviously, I've appeared publicly on a number of things. Probably from my first major case when I set on my own was Tim Collins.
Yeah.
And the investigation following that.
Yeah.
Which obviously had a wide publicity, which helped. Then the Baha Musa war crimes trial, and my client was the first acquitted effectively there, and I gave interviews after that to people. And word of mouth, because of I'm an ex-serving officer. People know me in the system, and word of mouth, people always come to me because in certain organisations I've done specialist support and advice. Okay.
And just finally from me, I mean, we've heard from you, Ms. Meredith, but from Mr. Cherry and Rev West, what is your impression of the support that's given to service personnel who are going through? So we hear, in this place, we hear one side of it from the Ministry of Defence, we hear another side of it from the serving soldiers. What is your view, sort of caught in the middle, if I can start with you, Reverend Mercer?
Justice delayed is justice denied. It's an awful long time. I'd rather like to put the army behind me after all these years, but I think that it just goes on and on and on. And just to give you my own personal circumstances, the IHAD came to see me in 2011, and I gave them a whole series of allegations that I'd made, and I thought that was that. Then I got rung up again. Oh, you haven't said this. And I said, it should all be in your notes. Then I got contacted again. So over a 5-year period, I've had 3 visits from the IHAD before my complaints were formally recorded in a statement. So why has it taken 5 years?
Is the impression there that, I mean, how does it take 5 years to take a statement?
I really don't know, but my impression was that the submission of evidence to the ICC galvanised the IHAD, because now another body was sitting on the shoulder of the UK.
Yeah. And what about you, Mr. Cherry?
There are, to my knowledge, 3 separate systems within the Ministry of Defence for how servicemen are to access. There's Queen's Regulations for the Army, which has one route. There's a joint service publication, JSP 838, and there's a DIN. And the DIN, a Defence Information Notice, which is not available on the internet, but it's available on the MOD intranet. And my biggest problem with the DIN is that nobody seems to know about it. And every time that I come across somebody that needs representation using the DIN, they call me and I produce the DIN and say, take that, I give them a copy of it, say, take that to your chain of command, and it'll tell the chain of command what they're supposed to do. And then there's a further complication with it. All 3 of them give contradictory advice. So the DIN talks about representation throughout the UK and throughout the world. The JSP says you can get things outside of Great Britain, which again is wrong because it only refers to Britain in what you'll get the AFCLA support for. It's outside. So Scotland...
Yeah, so it's not even legally correct.
It's not even legally correct. The JSP... the DIN says you should be supported from the initial outset, so for the police station interviews and onwards. The JSP says the chain of command should support after charge, which of course is further down the proceedings. So they're all contradictory.
Yeah.
And of course I know the system, but until someone comes to me, and quite often we have a problem of servicemen and women and families, because families overseas are also subject to things. They don't know, and if the chain of command don't tell them, even though the JSP says, the Queen's Regulation specifically says that the commanding officer should advise, if I give you the words, it says, commanding officers are to ensure that those under their command are acquainted with current instructions on this subject and to advise those in need of legal assistance, including next of kin, to seek it without delay. And that's JSP J.042 Bravo. If the commanding officers don't know, they're never going to tell their soldiers, sailors, airmen and families. And of course it falls to people like me to tell people.
Pick up the slack.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to John now.